Well, let's see here. I might not be Morgan Freeman, but this is... Classic Gamer Reviews.
F-ZeroX, the Nintendo 64, is a great game. The racing is fun, the tracks are fun, and I just had a plain fun time whenever I played it, even if I wasn't playing the game correctly. F-ZeroX is a sequel to the Super Nintendo F-Zero. While that was a revolutionary game when it came out, the developers could only do so much with a flat surface. There weren't any loops or stick ramps, there were only jump pads, but nothing like this! F-ZeroX went on, and in my opinion, showed people what the series was supposed to be like. All the pretty graphics of the Super Nintendo version just covered up to what, at its core, was just a basic racing game. F-ZeroX offers more variety in almost every aspect when compared to the original. The graphics are a bit, well, a pile of bad, but that was because you now had 30 racers on screen at once, all the while running at 60 frames per second. So while the graphics did take a hit, it allowed the developers to do so much more. For starters, you got a shit ton more tracks categorized into 5 categories that are categorized by an increase in difficulty, which is There are 5 cups, each have ranging difficulties. But now, keeping in mind that the tracks have to incorporate more people, the tracks are built very different from the Super Nintendo version. And that's not just because of the inclusion of inclines. Even the flat levels in F-ZeroX have a very different feel to them. In fact, for anyone who hasn't played F-ZeroX, first of all, you're dumb and should subscribe to my videos. And second of all, this is how I would describe the feeling. If you've ever driven a car, it's not that fun. But for some strange reason, if you drive a bumper car or a go-kart, it just feels different and better. That's the feeling you get when you play this game. The overall feeling of it is just better, like it flows. I love it! However, that flow is less of a gentle flow and stream, and more like a violent, raging rapid of water. Things in this game are fast. And because I'm an American, I can't comprehend all this kilometers per hour shit, but regardless, I know it's fast. So fast, in fact, that you'll sometimes just fly off the track at the slightest incline. If going super fast isn't good enough for you, then you can activate your boost, which you receive as a congrats you didn't die in your first lap gift. This incorporates a very fun risk factor in the game. You see, the more you boost, the more health you lose. If you're going fast, you're more likely to skid and lose control and hit stuff. But as it's a racing game, you're more likely to get ahead of the other racers if you boost. So if you feel you have a good layout of the track, then boosting is a good idea. But like I said, it's always at a risk. Especially since you can boost to your health requires only the slightest bump to kill you. It's a fun part of the game that really changes things up. For some strange reason, I always get a huge lust for blood, and I want to kill all my opponents. Because, let's face it, if you go fast and get in first place, you win. But if there's no one left to race, you still win. Luckily, you can bump into other players and make them die a horrific death. And the game even tells you who the biggest threat is. Like, if you're in second place, not in the race, but in the overall rankings, the game will tell you who is in first place in the rankings. So I just go ape shit on them. The game tells you this by highlighting the person who it is with the sign rival. However, the reason why I go ape shit on the rival is because the game usually picks the same 4 or 5 people to finish in the top for each cup. It's a bit cheap, but the game lets you deal with it by hitting them, so it's not that bad. That's really the only cheap thing about this. There's nothing to complain with the controls, as the same button you use to hit other people allows you to make tighter turns. That's not the only variable that determines how your vehicle moves. What I loved about this game is that aside from having stats for your vehicles, you can also change the acceleration and max speed. The trade-off, of course, being if you choose to accelerate quicker, you'll be able to recover quickly from crashes, but you won't be passing many people. The opposite being that with a high max speed but slow acceleration, you'll get fucking nowhere in life. Your whole future will spiral out of control, you'll be walking around in your own piss-filled pants, you'll be living in a box on the street, and come winter, you'll fucking die. The variety of the cars and stats is a great part of this game. The variety is also in the game modes. There's a ton of them. There's time attack, where you can get better times, race against a ghost of yourself, or a staff member of the team who developed the game. There's practice, burst mode, and death race. Death race is pretty self-explanatory. Just go in a never-ending loop and kill everything. Beat the fuck out of them, kill them, put their body parts in the dead man's kid's lunchbox, and then have sex with the guy's F-ZeroX. Rated E for everyone. Sorry about that. The verse mode is pretty fun as well. It has some limitations, such as not being able to do cups as a whole, but who the fuck cares, you greedy prick? I have no one to play it with, so it doesn't matter. No, in all seriousness, I have played it, and it is a fun add-on. Something the first one did lack, sadly. Now, there's something unique about the game I want to get into, and I don't mean explain. I mean I want to get into it and have sex with. What I'd like to talk about is the X Cup. The X Cup is unlocked when you beat the game, and what's neat about it is that it randomly generates tracks. The tracks, however, don't have any loops or jump pads in them, but they range from utterly boring to pure fun. Also, sometimes a penis. Behold the urinary tract infection rates! While it is a fun mode, and I can't stress that enough, some of the tracks that are generated are just unfair. Also, here the computer doesn't know how to handle the level, and a majority of them just die. This isn't cheap per se, it's more of a design flaw since it's difficult to program for random tracks. Playing the different levels feels like playing a scratch card. There's the potential for something great, but most of the time, you just get nothing. That being said, most of the time the boring generated tracks in the X Cup do have some variety and usually have one or two things that make them enjoyable. Overall, it's an unreviewable part of the game because it's always different. But for a Nintendo 64 game, that's pretty damn advanced. The less minor thing in the game that I want to talk about is the game's sound. I swear to God, I always kept hearing faint voices in the background that just seemed out of place. And the countdown guy is fucking annoying. 3, 2, 1. Overall though, if you put a gun to my head and told me to play this game, I'd probably be like, what are you gonna gain from shooting me, and why are you asking me to do cryptic tasks? You do know the police are gonna arrest you. But since that's not the case, you don't need to put a gun to my head to play this game, because it's a great game.
Let's see here. I may not be Morgan Freeman, but this is Classic Gamer Reviews.
And come winter, you'll die.